So, the next-gen consoles, the PS5, the Xbox Series X, are about a month away from release now, so I wanted to really start talking about the upcoming next-gen shift, discussing some of my hopes, definitely fears, in the case of today, as well as reflect a bit on this generation as a whole, so expect a lot of that sort of stuff in the coming days. And I want to address today what is perhaps my biggest concern as we look towards this generation and beyond, and that's the future, what feels like the grim future, for physical games. Digital games have been accounting for an increasingly larger part of game sales year over year, and straight up, we are launching with all digital versions of each console for the first time. And there are some who are suggesting that this may be the last time we get consoles that support physical media at all. I mean, if you look at the PC market, which everyone always talks about how the consoles have been chasing PC for a couple generations now, that's almost all digital these days. Like, when's the last time you even bought a physical game for PC and it wasn't like just a box with a code in it? And it's no secret, let's be real, that gaming companies want the all-digital future. It makes things way better for them, essentially having full control over your library. So I want to discuss some of the moves we may see as they push people more towards digital this generation, and consider whether or not this may be the last physical generation. Let's start by first just briefly touching on why some prefer physical games, definitely myself, because I see a lot of people specifically who have grown up more in the digital age, not really understanding the appeal. Digital games are definitely much easier to acquire. You don't have to worry about losing or damaging them. You don't have to put them somewhere. There are plenty of benefits to going digital, I'll fully admit it. But I think there are typically three big reasons why people want physical games. One, the collecting aspect. I think when people consider themselves collectors of really anything, they like to have tangible objects that they actually collect. You don't really see people say like, I collect digital comic books or something like that. If someone says they collect comics, you assume they collect physical ones. They prefer to have physical items that they can hold as well as display. Then there's the factor of ownership. A physical game is yours. You can sell it, loan it out to a friend, whatever. With a digital copy of something, you do not own that thing. You're not actually buying that game, movie, song, whatever. You're buying a license, essentially, to consume it, to access it. You're much more limited in terms of what you can do here, and this license could be revoked. Quite simply, if you're naughty on, like, let's say, Xbox Live or PSN, you cheat, throw out some gamer words in a heated match, bad things for sure, but you could, as a result, get your account banned and lose access to all of your digital games on that platform. But if you have physical games, it's not like someone's going to come to your house and confiscate all the games you have on that platform. And then there's the aspect of preservation. These digital storefronts can go away one day. Licensing issues can cause titles to not be on sale in digital format anymore, perhaps even not allowing you to download them anymore. This has been a big issue with Nintendo in the Wii Shop. They gave out the dates like, after this point, you're not going to be able to download any of the games, even if you purchase them. Like, after this point, you better download all the games you have and back them up, because you're not going to be able to download them again. And there's always problems with licensed game where there's, a big movie IP or something that contracts a studio to make a game based on that IP. You definitely see this with, like, older licensed games, your Batman, TMNT type stuff over the years. They don't get re-released anywhere else because there's often all these different rights holders involved. So the only official way to access them, to play them, is via the original physical releases. A lot of reasons why people like physical games. So how might these companies make this stuff harder or not as worthwhile for players? Because for them to achieve this all-digital future, they're going to have to get at least the majority of players to accept an all-digital future, make them want to go digital. So how are they going to try to do that? Well, the first, most obvious thing is definitely price. If you want people to sign up for something, saving them money is pretty much always a great way to do it. As all of you, I'm sure, are aware, the digital versions of these systems are a much cheaper buy-in. The PS5 all-digital version is $100 cheaper than the standard PS5, and the Series S is a whopping $200 cheaper than the Series X. Obviously, the S has more specs that have been dialed down so it could hit that price. So you have the lower entry point, but what about the games? Games do seem like they're going to be getting a price increase to $70 here in the States this generation, We've seen several titles list that price, not something that's been 100% across the board, but kind of like pushing people towards digital. It does make sense that they try to ease us into this. It's not going to be all games are $70 right off the bat, but I would definitely say after a few years, $70 will probably be the standard price. So the games on their own are going to cost more than they used to, which makes services like Xbox Game Pass that much more desirable. For, like $10 a month to start, you get access to that huge library of games. All the Microsoft exclusive stuff is going to be there day one. And again, that becomes a better deal, more value once you raise the price of all these games. And of course, when it comes to pushing people towards digital, these companies love the subscription model best, as you have to stay subscribed to play the games. Once you cancel, you lose all your access. You could be subscribed to a Game Pass or something for 10 years, and boom, the minute you unsubscribe, it's all gone. You paid hundreds of dollars into the service, and you have 0 games. And Sony is clearly going to try to get more into the subscription game as well. They announced recently that PlayStation Plus collection deal, I think it was called, where you'll get a bunch of PS4 games with PlayStation Plus. I believe it starts when the PlayStation 5 launches or around that time. Not as robust as Game Pass for sure, but you're also not paying the extra fee. These games are part of PlayStation Plus, and you're getting some killers in there like God of War. And I do think they'll end up charging more for a premier or higher tier access, which includes a bigger library of games just like Game Pass in the future. And obviously we're seeing other companies like EA, etc. do their own service. I think it always makes sense to look towards other media to see what you're probably in store for. Like with movies and TV, Netflix totally changed the game, and I kind of think that's what Microsoft is doing with Game Pass. But then it's like Hulu came along and it's like, okay, I'll sign up for Netflix and Hulu. But then it feels like every movie studio and channel is doing their own service, which means a bunch of the content gets pulled from one place and goes over to the other. And then they're flip-flopping and switching back and forth. Before you know it, you're subscribed to like 5 different services to get all the stuff you want, and you're back to paying close to what you were for cable. So that's something I think players definitely need to be concerned about as the subscription model becomes more prominent here. When other people see success, they're going to try to replicate it. Now, what about preservation? Now, Xbox, in terms of preservation, we got to give it to them. They've been doing great things with the backwards compatibility in that, but make no mistake about it, Xbox started this big backwards compatibility campaign only after they were extremely far behind, trailing Sony, and it's kind of like they had to do something to renew interest in their system. It definitely wasn't part of the initial plan when the console launched, and I don't believe we actually would be here with Xbox being this great backwards compatibility machine. You're going to be able to throw original Xbox 360 games, Xbox One games as well, all into the Xbox Series X. I personally do not believe that would have been the case if the roles were reversed and Xbox had been kicking Sony's ass this generation. But beyond that, preservation, this is an aspect we've been losing honestly more and more of each generation. You know, your old school Super Nintendo, N64, PlayStation games, you always can just pop them in whenever and play them. But more modern titles often have updates, the big famous day one patch oftentimes, to get them running smoothly. So in terms of if these servers and that all shut down one day and you can't download games, well, you wouldn't be able to download patches either. And I think this arena could get much worse this gen. Not just with games being broken without the patches, but if you're a Nintendo collector, you're probably familiar, you probably dread seeing this message across the top of your games. Not only does it ruin the box art, but it means the game isn't even playable without an additional download. Since the Switch cards are more expensive, definitely for the bigger cards, we often see publishers cheap out and just throw us like a 1 gig card for what may be, I don't know, a 20 gig game, and just make the player download the rest of it. Now, disc formats get you way more data for much cheaper, but I think we could see this become a thing this gen for the Xbox and PlayStation, as we get these massive games loaded with 4K assets. Probably most importantly, developers who don't seem to give a shit about optimization and compression. I mean, people are already saying expect 100 gig games to be like no big deal this generation. I believe if that's the case, we could see more games on these new systems requiring an additional download to play, which hurts that idea of long-term preservation. Because yeah, if that's the case, while you still own your copy of the game, that copy doesn't actually have the full game on it. So that's something else I would definitely be watching out for. Now, I don't want to be all doom and gloom about this. So what will keep physical games alive? Simply enough, the demand and need for them, more so the latter, seeing as how, again, these companies definitely want to push us towards that digital future as much as possible. As long as you buy games physically, you're providing demand. Another factor, your big box retail stores are definitely going to continue to push for physical games as it gets people to actually come into the stores as well. There's not much of a reason to buy games from a retailer location digitally unless like you wanted to like pay cash for, a gift card to Xbox or PSN's digital stores. And despite what many may think, there is still a benefit to having your game sitting there on store shelves, so when people, kids and stuff who might not be, as into video games as me and you, looking up all the news and that every day, they just walk past it and they see a game and they're like, oh wow, this looks cool, maybe I'll pick that up. There is still a big benefit to stuff like that. And I would say probably the biggest hurdle, the biggest problem for an all-digital future still today is the limited availability of high-speed internet connections. Straight up, to have digital games, people need to be able to download those digital games. There are still many places where it will take you forever to download full games, and that's only going to get worse as the games get bigger. And on top of that, data caps. People with data caps are going to be hitting that ceiling incredibly fast. So I think you risk losing a lot of people in those camps if you go full digital. And again, I think it's probably one of the bigger reasons a major console like an Xbox or PlayStation just can't go that route yet, no matter how bad they want to do so. But beyond this gen, I definitely say who knows how many people are going to have, say, better access to high-speed internet and that, and who knows how long this generation is going to be. It could be 10 years. I mean, the PS5 and Series X generation hasn't even officially started yet. So you're definitely making a very far-off prediction if you want to discuss, like, what things are going to look like when a PlayStation 6 rolls around. But the fact is, again, like I said, these companies are pushing for it. They're making it more and more enticing to go digital, and the trends are definitely going that way in terms of sales, digital sales, like I said, making up an increasingly larger part of the market. So I would definitely say if you want to see physical games continue to persist, just like with any product, you definitely want to keep supporting them. I've talked about this before, I buy games off like limited run games and that where they print small runs of like indie games and that in physical form that wouldn't get a physical release otherwise. And you often end up paying more for those physical versions of the games, but to me it's worth it. And the success of that means more games being made available in physical form rather than less. I mean, in terms of indie games, we actually are probably getting more games physical now on like the PS4 and the Nintendo Switch than we were last gen. But I gotta say, in terms of the long distant future again, even with the collector aspect even, I've got to wonder how long of legs all this really has. I mean, I think a big part of collecting, whether it be games, music, comic books, whatever, partly has to do with nostalgia. Like, the people who grew up owning this stuff are the ones that want to continue to own it, that want to collect it, build their collection in that. But like, now with this generation, we are going to have people who do in fact grow up with these all-digital consoles. There will be kids, pay attention here, there will be kids who get a digital PS5 or an Xbox Series S as their first console ever. And if this is how you grow up consuming media, if this is what you end up knowing, just, all digital all the time, are you really going to give a shit about going physical later on? I don't know. I think that's the big question to consider, though, when we talk about the long-term viability of physical games. So I guess what I'm saying is raise your damn kids the right way and teach them to appreciate physical games. Anyway, with that, this video's a wrap. Let me know your thoughts on the war, the fight for physical games in the comments. What kind of trends do you think we'll see this generation in terms of digital versus physical? And how big of a role do you think having these all-digital systems right from the get-go is going to have on the future prospects for physical games? And of course, do you believe this is going to be the last generation of physical games? Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed this discussion of the ongoing war for physical games and whether or not this may be the last generation we get physical releases. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing, and if you want to keep the conversation going, hit me up on Twitter at JohnnyZakari, and join my Discord, ChiGuy and Friends, link to both in the description below. And as always, thanks for watching.